השם מלך, השם מלך, השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, היום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. הוי והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי נה 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 ניי ניי נה 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 ניי 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 אוי ניי 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 השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי נה 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 Nai nai na na nai 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 na nai 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 na nai na na nai na nai na na nai 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 na na nai 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 na nai oi nai nai na na nai oh שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. This is Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. There we go. And welcome to this week's Torah study. We are going to be doing officially Metzora. However, I do want to point out, and this is for some of the new people, though I do list the Parsha as the topic or the theme of the Torah study, I don't always stick to it. And I know there were some comments by somebody last week saying, hey, this is not the parsha you said it was going to be. This is just a guideline. And in fact, what we're going to do today is continue where we were last week, which is in the beginning of Leviticus. We've been spending the past couple of weeks speaking about the different types of sacrifices, getting to know them. And I want to continue on with that. And I think we can finish it today and kind of sum it up, wrap it up. And then, yes, Jasmine, I know. So this is directed towards you, really. And then we'll see what we're going to do for the rest of the Parsha or for the rest of the study this week. We'll see what we're going to do in coming weeks. Maybe what I will do is if I decide to just go off the Parsha schedule and just go through Leviticus slowly or go through the Torah slowly, the way we need to, then maybe I'll start changing the titles to, studies in Leviticus 3, or Leviticus and then chapters whatever. I'm not sure yet, but for now I'm just going to stick to the parshas names for the studies, and we'll see where it all goes. Because again, my thinking here is with Leviticus, I think it's better to do a couple chapters and do it right rather than just rush through the whole thing. And honestly, nobody ever gets anything out of that because Leviticus can be quite technical. And if it's not studied correctly, then it's, to put it quite frankly, it can be very boring. It could just like go right over a person's head, or we can go right over it. As I always like to call it, it's Torah flyover country, right? Nobody likes to, nobody wants to really listen to these parts. They like the golden calf. They like the crossing of the Red Sea. They like the stories about the patriarchs. But once you get into the nitty gritty, the technical aspects of the sacrificial system, for instance, then it has the tendency to get really boring, especially if it's just done quickly. And I always like to tell the story of how I've multiple times over my life been in synagogues, and I've, a lot of times in the synagogue, the rabbi is not necessarily the one doing the Torah reading on the Shabbat morning. So someone else will often do the Torah reading, and I've actually seen the rabbi snooze off. I've seen rabbis snooze off multiple times during these types of parshas, where it's very technical. Let's say the last half of Exodus, where it's speaking about the details of the building of the tabernacle. Many parts of Leviticus, which are very technical, and that's a shame. It's a shame to treat these chapters as Torah flyover country because they are fascinating. They're absolutely fascinating. It's like putting the pieces of a puzzle together, and when you understand how all those pieces fit. There's Phil. Let me let him in. Shalom, Phil. Shabbat shalom. When you understand how all these pieces fit together, then you really get a lot out of it, because the different types of sacrifices I've mentioned now for a couple of weeks are mentioned throughout the Tanakh. Whether you're even reading it in English or whether you're reading it in Hebrew, you'll come across. I was listening to Psalms today, and David says something like, "I will bring my peace offerings to the Lord of the temple." I can't remember which psalm it was exactly, but what is a peace offering? What does that mean? Well, now we have an idea from what we've been doing for the past couple of weeks. We have an idea of what exactly is a peace offering. What's a guilt offering? What is a hatat, a sin offering? What's a burnt offering? What is a grain offering, or a grain offering of fire, or fire grain offering, right? Which we learned is different from, for instance, the Omer offering, which is a tnufa, it's a wave offering, often translated into English as the wave sheaf offering. Why is the Omer offering, I shouldn't say the Omer offering, why is the offering that's brought on Shavuot, the 2 loaves of leavened wheat bread, why is that allowed to be leavened? Whereas in Leviticus chapter 2, it speaks about the grain offerings, and it says they're not allowed to be leavened. They can't be leavened bread. They can't have any yeast or any honey. Why? Well, we found out that applies for grain offering, which is thrown on the altar, a fire grain offering, or a grain fire offering, right? Or a grain offering of fire, okay? It's thrown on the altar of sacrifice. A piece of it, a memorial piece of it, is thrown. A handful is taken, or a chunk is taken, and thrown on the altar of sacrifice. And those types of grain offerings cannot be leavened. They must be unleavened bread. They have to be matzah of different types. But however, if it's not thrown on the altar, like the first fruits offering of Shavuot, then it can be leavened bread. In fact, it has to be leavened bread for the Shavuot offering. So all of these different things, we understand some of the basics of the sacrificial system, then that's going to really, I think, serve a long way when we're just reading through the Tanakh anywhere, because we're going to come across these terms again and again and again, because the sacrificial system was such an integral part, such an important part of of ancient Israelite life, right? It was really the central activity that Israel carried on in its worship, in its service to Yahweh, was bringing meat or grain sacrifices. Okay. So that being said, we'll dig in a second. I guess I'll make a quick comment about what happened. I guess it was last week. It was last Saturday night, wasn't it? With Iran sending all those missiles and drones, and Israel giving a piddly little response after being, reined in, best friend ever in the history of the world. Its frenemy, known as the United States of America, whose main purpose is not to enhance Israel's security or to, oh God, 1 second, please. Is not to promote Israel's security. 1 second, let me just put something here. Is not to promote Israel's security, but is to reign in Israel and make sure that Israel does not reach its full destiny, does not self-actualize and become what it is always meant, it is always meant to be. And as I've said many times before, the United States is still the world's leading power, no doubt about it. Some people like to say that there is now it's not a unipolar world anymore. It's not just the United States. Now China, Russia also have their stake in being leading world powers, and that's true, and that's evidence of the United States' decline. Whereas before the fall of the Soviet Union, it was the really only world power, I should say. After the fall of the Soviet Union, it really was for a while the only world power. But we see America's power, its influence, waning. We see that it's falling apart at the seams, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. I follow the news in America. Thank God I have not been in America for a number of years now, and I don't. Well, I might have to come back to visit family soon, but at any rate, I don't plan to live there ever again for the rest of my life. But we see it falling apart at the seams, and I follow the American news a lot. And there seems to be more and more talk about civil war, about violence. There was an article this week about Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that people should arm themselves and get ready for potential civil war if Donald Trump is placed in jail for contempt of court, etc. There's a movie that came out, which I haven't seen, but I've heard about, called Civil War. It's a lot of talk of civil war, and this just isn't talk. When all these movies, when all these articles, when all these memes come out that are kind of forecasting or kind of foretelling civil war, then that's because the feeling, the shared psyche of that country is feeling that the civil war is on the way and getting closer. Just like before 2001, there was a large amount of movies speaking about Armageddon, destruction of New York, all of these kinds of things, destruction of America. So I think that people feel in their soul what's coming, and I think people know and feel that the United States of America is a declining power. And the point of that is that there is and it's going to implode one way or another. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I don't know the details. I have my opinion, but I don't know the details. But we do know that other countries are vying to be the next great world power. China is probably the most prominent one. They're ready to step in and fulfill the role of Shabbat Shalom, Martha. How are you? Of the next world power. Maybe Iran, at least, is thinking that it will be the next regional power at the very least, and maybe with the backing of Russia, even a possible world power, a secondary world power. Russia is definitely preparing itself to step into that role. Okay, so there's going to be a change of paradigm. There is going to be an end of an era coming. The end of the era defined by the United States being the leading world power. and secondarily Western Europe, which is basically under the shadow of the United States or under the wing of protection of the United States, since World War II. That's coming to an end. It's pretty clear. And now the question is who's going to be the next world power? Is it going to be China? Is it going to be Russia? And I would like to propose that it's not going to be China and it's not going to be Russia, that it's going to be Israel. It's going to be Israel. And of course, I don't mean the current state of Israel, which is also falling apart. As the West falls apart, so the current state of Israel falls apart, because the current secular state of Israel has thrown its lot in with the United States of America, has thrown its lot in with the West. Essentially, it has turned the United States of America into its God. When it looks for protection, it doesn't look to God, it doesn't look to Yahweh, it looks to the United States of America. The United States of America is the God of the current secular state of Israel. And as I have been saying for years, when the teat dies, then the sucklings die as well. And America is the teat, and Israel, the current secular state of Israel, is the suckling. So that's the situation we have. The current state of Israel will fall. There's no question about it. As sure as night follows day, as sure as day follows night, the current secular state of Israel will collapse. When, how, I don't know. As a friend of mine always used to say, my good friend Avner back in Jerusalem, he always used to say, "In stopper." I don't have a stopwatch. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen. I don't know the details, but I know 100% for sure that the current secular state of Israel will collapse. It will fall. But out of the ashes will rise the new state of Israel, and that hopefully, that will be, in my opinion, will be a true Torah state. Not a rabbinical Judaism state, not a Talmudic state, not a secular Western America worshiping state, but a true Karaite / Tanach-based / true Old Testament-based state. And so I would claim that the next great power is going to be Israel, not the current state of Israel, the true state of Israel that we all hoped for, that we all longed for, that when some of us made Aliyah, moved to Israel, I did so on June 23rd, 1993. I'll never forget that day. And I haven't always lived in Israel since then, but for many years I have, on and off. And that state of Israel that we dreamed and hoped we were coming to will actually exist as the next great world superpower. And of course, it will not be a superpower that just sucks all the blood out of the world like the United States of America does, but it will be a superpower that pumps energy and spirituality and peace and wisdom and knowledge into the entire world. So that's what I'm looking forward to, and that's what I hope. At any rate, getting back to what happened with Iran a week ago, so there are two takes on it. There are two sets of analyses, two sets of pundits, two sets of takes on the whole thing. One states that it was a great success for Iran, and one states that it was a great failure for Iran. So the people who say that it's a great success, they basically say that the Iranians never really intended to do damage. They just wanted to scare the Israelis. They wanted to send a message to Israel. They sent these old cheap drones and these old cheap missiles, and they said days in advance that there was going to be an attack. They projected it wasn't a surprise attack. They projected exactly what they were going to do. And these drones took hours to get to Israel. I remember last Saturday night just sitting and watching the news and waiting to see what was going to happen. And so that therefore it was a great victory for Iran, because they never really intended to send their top weapons to Israel. But what they did get out of it is that Israel and the United States and other allies spent, I think it was billions. I don't even remember how much the amount was, but billions of dollars shooting down these drones and shooting down these slow old missiles with the Patriot system, with the Iron Dome system, and with God knows what else. Literally spent billions of dollars to wipe out, a bunch of old missiles costing maybe in the millions of dollars that Iran sent over there. And therefore it was a great victory, because Iran scared the pants off of Israel, which they did. Iran made the West waste billions and billions and billions of dollars shooting down old useless drones. And Iran also got to see the defenses of Israel and the defenses of the West. In other words, it was kind of a test run, just like, let's say, when a boxer, kind of toys around with his opponent. He wants to see how the opponent is going to react. So that is what one set of pundits says. The other set of pundits says, no, it was a great victory. Iran really did want to do damage. They intended to do some serious damage to Israel, and every single one of their missiles, except for one or two, were knocked out of the sky, and it made Iran look weak, and it made Israel look strong, and et cetera, et cetera. So those are two sides. So I thought about it, and I'm sorry to say, but I agree with the first side. I don't think it made Israel look particularly strong. I think it made Israel look pathetic, as a matter of fact, especially since the response was just, piddling. It was also pathetic. It was just, what did they do? They blew up an airport in Isfahan in the south of Iran, and they didn't really do much of anything. And Iran is, now considering the case closed. And since Iran is considering the case closed, Israel is considering the case closed. That's it, game over. And what did Israel accomplish? Pretty much nothing. And what did Iran accomplish? They scared the hell out of Israel, out of the state of Israel. They made the West waste billions and billions of dollars of the latest weapons to shoot down these old drones and missiles, and they showed the Israelis that they were willing to attack. In other words, they raised everything to a new level. So I don't know what Iran's intentions were. I don't know if their intentions were really to have their drones and missiles strike Israel, or if they knew in advance that they were all going to be shot down. I don't think it matters. I think that this makes Israel look weak, because this is the first time in history, I think. I don't know about history. History is pretty long. First time that I can remember in modern history that Iran has directly attacked Israel, and Israel, for all its talk over the years, did absolutely nothing to respond. Iran sent hundreds of drones, a bunch of missiles, and Israel did pretty much nothing in return. So I think that I go with the first set of pundits, that it makes Israel look even weaker than ever. The Iranians clearly have much more advanced weaponry, which they've threatened to use. Israel's not going to do anything about it. All Israel does is wait for its God, its daddy, America, to come and save it. That's been its policy, and the policy of this useless Benjamin Netanyahu for decades now, is just to try to goad America into a war against Iran in order to save its little brother Israel. But America's sick and tired of this. America doesn't see any reason that it has to sacrifice its own weapons, its own soldiers, its own lives, its own standing in the Middle East to save Israel. So the whole thing is just a giant joke, as a matter of fact. And of course, Israel is learning that its false god, the United States of America, is not going to save it. It's been calling out to the wrong god for decades. Benjamin Netanyahu tries to dress like a Westerner, act like a Westerner, talk like a Westerner, and his entire policy, his entire strategy has been to say that an attack on Israel is an attack on the United States of America, to basically say that the interests of Israel and the interests of the United States of America are one and the same. Therefore, basically getting the United States of America to act as big brother, to act as daddy, to take down Iran. That's been Benjamin Netanyahu's his policy, his strategy for decades now, right? And it's turned out to be a complete failure, because the United States of America, especially after what happened on October 7th, where more and more public opinion is turning against Israel and is turning against the Jews. So therefore, Biden, in order to win the swing states, he now has to kowtow to the desires of the Muslims in the United States and to the leftists in the United States, or he knows he's not going to win. So Big Brother America, God America, false God America is, just as the Tanakh predicts, when you go to false gods, is going to fail Israel, is not going to stand up and be the true God that Israel can rely on and that can protect Israel. So we've been calling out, not we, I haven't been doing it, the secular state of Israel has been calling out to the wrong God, to a false God known as the United States of America, known as the West, known as Western culture, known as Western society for decades now, really since the founding of the state. And that false God has been shown time and time again, or that God has been shown time and time again to be a false God. And I always like the quote, is it at the end of Jeremiah? Let me just find it here for a second. Let's see where it is. Isaiah. Yeah. It's Isaiah 36:6. Let's see if I can just bring it up here. So Isaiah 36:6. Isaiah 36:4-7. I'll just read in English. Then Rav Shaked said to them, "Tell Hezekiah that the great king, the king of Assyria, says." This is when the Assyrians are taunting Hezekiah on the walls of Jerusalem. The king of Assyria says this: "What kind of backing do you think you have against me? You're bluffing, and I'm calling your bluff. Your words are no match for my weapons. What kind of backup do you have now that you rebelled against me? Egypt? Don't make me laugh," I guess is the colloquial translation. "Egypt is a rubber crutch. Lean on Egypt." Now, this is, I want the more, let's get an NIV. Hold on a second. Isaiah 36:6. Just give me 1 second here. I mean, that's a nice translation, but I would like something a bit more literal. Isaiah 36:6. Let me just bring it up. Isaiah 36:6. Okay, so I'll just read from the beginning here in English. Sancherib threatens Jerusalem is the headline here, or is the paragraph title. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah's reign, Sancherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities of Judah. So this is Assyria coming out against Judah, and captured them. Then the king of Assyria sent his field commander with a large army from Lachish, which was basically the second most important city after Jerusalem in the southern kingdom of Judah, to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. When the commander stopped at the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field, Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna, the secretary, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, went out to him. The field commander, so this is the Assyrians, camped outside of the walls of Jerusalem, now shouting out to these Judeans, saying, "Tell Hezekiah, this is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing this confidence of yours?" What confidence? Hezekiah has set up this wall of defense, and he believes, actually he's been told already, well, no, he has not been told yet, he believes that he will be able to stave off the attack by the Assyrians. "You say you have counsel and might for war, but you speak only empty words. On whom are you defending that you rebel against me? Look, I know you are depending on Egypt, that splintered reed of a staff which pierces the hand of anyone who leans on it." And we'll get back to that verse in a second. "Such is Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to all who depend on him. But if you say to me, we are depending on Yahweh, our God, isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar?" Okay, and then he goes on. The point being that the king of Syria, or actually the field commander, at the behest of the king of Syria, Sancherib, is taunting Hezekiah's officers, and saying, "You have made an alliance with Egypt. You're depending on Egypt. You've rejected your God, Yahweh, okay? And instead, you've taken as your God Egypt." Egypt was one of the great superpowers of that time. Assyria and Egypt were the two great superpowers of that time. So you're depending on Egypt. And what does he say? What does the field commander say to Hezekiah's officers? He says about Egypt, "that splintered reed of a staff, which pierces the hand of anyone who leans on it." In other words, you rely on a staff. If you have a walking stick, you rely on that walking stick to lean on it, right? It's something you lean on as you're walking or as you're hiking. But this staff that you're leaning on, Egypt, is not a staff you can lean on. It's splintered. It's sharp. Okay, splintered reed of a staff. So when you lean on it, what's going to happen? It's not going to support your hand. It's going to pierce right through your hand. Please, no Christian stuff. No Christian analyses here or analogies. Banana. And it's going to splinter right through your hand. And instead of you leaning on it, it's going to injure you. It's going to injure your hand, right? I'll read it again. "Look, I know you're depending on Egypt, that splintered reed of a staff, which pierces the hand of anyone who leans on it. Such is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who depend on him." Okay? So you, Israel, you depended on the great superpower of the time to protect yourself from Assyria, to protect yourself from the attack by Sancherib, the king of Assyria. This was a false god that you depended on. You thought the superpower, the opposing superpower, if you can think of Assyria as, let's say, I don't know, China, and or let's say Assyria is like Russia, and Egypt is like the United States. Okay? So you thought the opposing superpower was going to come to your aid. Okay, and what happened at the same time? You rejected your God, Yahweh. But if you say to me, we are depending on Yahweh, our God, isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar? So Hezekiah actually did a good thing. Hezekiah was a decent king, a good king, and he removed all the high places to Yahweh. So the Assyrians don't really know this. And then he said, come worship Yahweh only in Jerusalem, which is a good thing, which was the right thing to do. But this was interpreted by the Assyrian king as rejection of Yahweh. And in fact, by accepting Egypt and not relying on Yahweh, but relying instead on the superpower Egypt, just like today, Israel is rejecting Yahweh and relying on the United States of America. It's replacing Yahweh. It's replacing Yahweh with the United States of America. Its God is the United States of America. Its daddy, its big brother that's going to protect it is the United States of America. And what Sancheriv's officer is saying here is that you've rejected your God, Yahweh, and instead you've accepted as your God the leading superpower of that time, the United States of America of that time, and that's Egypt. And it's going to fail, okay? In the end, the Assyrians do not attack or do not conquer, do not breach the walls of Jerusalem. If we read on, we would see exactly what happened. But basically, they are stopped at the walls of Jerusalem, and they're miraculously sent away. But that was from Yahweh. That was not from the superpower Egypt, i.e., the United States of America at its time. It was not Egypt that saved Israel. It was Yahweh that intervened directly and decided to save Israel because Hezekiah was a good, decent king. Okay? So that's the situation we have today. The situation we have today is that that Israel, the current secular state of Israel, is relying on this false God, the United States of America, thinking the United States of America is going to come save its butt, but the United States of America is not going to save Israel's butt. The United States of America has been proven time and time again to be a false God, a God that if you lean on it, if you expect that it's going to support you and you lean on it for support, then instead what it's going to do, it's going to pierce your hand right through and you're going to be injured from leaning on the United States of America. And that's precisely what we see right now. America, the United States of America, is the greatest frenemy that Israel has ever had. They do not want Israel to be victorious. Their main role in this, in everything that's been happening since October 7th, and actually stretching years, if not decades, stretching decades back really, has been not to support Israel, not to, despite their wonderful proclamations about how Israel doesn't have an ally stronger than more dedicated than the United States of America. America is dedicated to Israel's security. All that bullshit that Biden, through his handlers, Biden doesn't say anything because half his brain is missing. Excuse me, hold on a second. Because half his brain is missing. I don't know what happened to it. I think he had, I think it was removed when he had like some kind of head surgery or something like that. At any rate, that his handlers say, where was I? I was interrupted for a second. Hold on. I may just have to block someone's trying to call me here for 1 second. Just give me 1 second. I apologize. This one is trying to call me repeatedly. How do I do this? I don't even know how to do it. Afterwards. Okay, hopefully it won't call again. So what was I saying? I lost my train of thought. But the United States of America is never really there to support Israel, despite their wonderful proclamations. The main role of the United States of America, as one of my favorite, he's not even really a politician, but ostensibly a politician in Israel, Moshe Feiglin always likes to say, the main role of the United States of America is to hold Israel back from reaching its true destiny, from self-actualizing. That's the main role of the United States of America, because the United States of America, right, the Americans, or at least, I won't say all Americans, but the typical secular leftist-leaning Americans know that if Israel rises, that means America falls. Okay, so they know the party is over if they allow Israel to reach their true destiny. So they can proclaim, "Oh, I'm your best friend. I have your back. I'm going to take care of you." And really, what they're doing is they're trying to hold Israel back from reaching its destiny. Well, it won't work forever. Just like someone who's, let's say, in an abusive relationship, it may last for a while, but eventually, if the person who is being abused is not completely destroyed, eventually that person is going to wise up and take some action and get the hell out of Dodge and realize that the person who is supposedly their spouse, their protector, whatever, is actually their abuser. And it takes a while for that realization to come. But once it does, then eventually with the help of Yahweh, then eventually the person is able to leave the abusive relationship. So what we have here is really an abusive relationship between Israel, current state of Israel, and the United States of America. America saying it's I'm going to protect you, I'm going to take care of you, and really America just doing the exact opposite, trying to hold Israel back from reaching its destiny. But of course, at the end of the day, it's Israel's fault because they chose this false God in place of the true God, Yahweh. Okay? So that's my assessment of the whole situation. My assessment of the whole situation is that Israel came out looking worse than ever. Israel was attacked directly by Iran and basically did nothing in retaliation. In fact, I know that there were plans to have a massive retaliation. Apparently, it was all like planned out, like war gamed out, and then at the last minute, it was scrapped because Biden doesn't do anything. Biden's puppeteers, told Benjamin Netanyahu not to go ahead with those plans. And then Benjamin Netanyahu made some lame statements such as, due to diplomatic sensitivities, we've decided not to retaliate strongly to Iran. Wonderful. Okay. All right. So that's my assessment of the situation. Israel, after what happened last week, is in a worse situation, not a better situation. It didn't make Israel look strong. It made Israel look weak. Israel was attacked for the first time ever in my memory in recent history, I think since the founding of the state of Israel, at the very least, maybe ever. Since ancient times, was attacked directly by Iran, and Israel and the West ended up spending billions of dollars to shoot down a bunch of old drones and old missiles, and Iran was able to expose the defense systems of the West and of Israel, and scare the bejesus, no, not the bejesus, the Yahweh out of Israel, and basically they come out looking much stronger, and I think Israel comes out looking much weaker. So that's my assessment situation. All right. All that being said, just give me 1 second here, just to respond to this person who keeps on trying to call me. 1 second, please, and then we're going to get into the Torah study. Okay, so that being said, let's get into our Torah study, and we're going to pick it up in, let's see where we got exactly last week. So we got through the end of 5, was it? Is that right? I believe so. What was it? Did we get into 6? 1 second here. The guilt offering we did. Let's see, no, we did that. So that's into 6. The burnt. Okay, we got up to here. Right. We got into here. We got up to Leviticus chapter 6, verse 7. We're going to start off in Leviticus chapter 6, verse 8. I scared the bejesus out of you. Okay. I scared the Yeshua out of you. All right. Here we go. So let me share the screen. And for everyone, anywhere, whether you're in the United States of Israel, that's a good way to put it, the United States of America, in Israel, anywhere in the world, what we need to do now, all of the good people, all of us who are loyal to the word of Yahweh, is we need to call out to him by name. We need to call out to him by name, Yahweh. We need to pray to him. We need to be on our best behavior, confess our sins, even if we don't know what they are. Listening to Psalms, you hear a lot of times that David says, even if I don't know what my sins are, I confess them. So it's okay to, say I'm sorry for whatever I've done wrong, even without knowing exactly what you've done wrong. And we just have to cling to Yahweh, and hopefully those who cling to him, he will come and save us through these troubling times that we're facing right now. And we will all, sing happily and rejoice when the time comes in Jerusalem together. Okay, so let me share the window here. Boom. That's that. Give me 1 second, please. So We're going to pick it up in Leviticus chapter 6. Again, just a very, very brief review of what we've studied so far. We've studied the different types of offerings, the different types of sacrifices. Okay. The first was the burnt offering, or what we're calling the holy burnt, or sometimes it's called the holocaust. Holy, hala, burnt, cost, like caustic means, it will burn your skin. So holocaust means holy burnt. And as I've mentioned in some previous studies, that's where we get the word Holocaust from. The word Holocaust was originally an English translation of this, what's often translated as the burnt offering. It was often translated as the Holocaust offering because the whole thing is burnt on the altar, except for certain parts which are just not, which are thrown on the garbage pile. But basically, everything else is burnt on the altar. None of it goes to the Kohanim. None of it is taken out of the camp, as we saw in the case of the sin offering. It's all burnt on the offering. So it's called the burnt offering, or the holy burnt offering, or the Holocaust offering. The next type was the grain offering, and specifically the grain offering of fire. Okay, these are grains that are either flour, or they're different types of unleavened bread that are either baked in an oven, fried on a griddle, or fried on a flat on a frying pan, on a deeper pan. And basically a portion of these offerings, these cakes, or this basket of flour, is taken and thrown on the altar of sacrifice. And so therefore it's a burnt or a fire grain offering. It's grain, which part of which is thrown on the altar, and then the rest is given to the Kohanim as their gift, as their salary, essentially. Okay, as their recompense. Okay, so that was the grain fire offering, or the grain offering of fire. Okay, then we spoke about what's often translated as the peace offering, in Hebrew the shlamim. Okay, the peace offering, or the fellowship offering, or we translated it as the communion offering, I believe was the word we used in the end. Okay, the communion offering. So this is kind of like, hey God, I want to thank you for something, or I want to get close to you, or I want to just say how much I appreciate you. And so you can bring this shlamim, this shalem, this peace, or this fellowship, or this communion offering. That was the third type. And then we spoke about the sin offering, okay, or the recompense from unintentional sin offering. Okay, it's basically allows for atonement from unintentional sins, usually just translated as sin offering. And then the fifth offering we spoke about was the guilt offering, the asham. And the guilt offering we saw was similar to the sin offering, except it had specifically to do with monetary indiscretion. So unintentional misuse of money that was supposed to be dedicated, or things that were supposed to be dedicated to God. So, for instance, you were supposed to tithe and you forgot to tithe. That would be an unintentional monetary transgression against the temple or against Yahweh, and other such things, or intentional monetary sins against human beings. So, for instance, you took a pledge from somebody in return for a loan. So I will lend you $100, and in return you leave as collateral your goat. And then the person comes back, pays back the $100, and says, "Please give me my goat back." And the guy says, "What goat? I don't know what you're talking about. Goat? I don't see any goat around here. Do you see a goat? I don't see a goat." Right? That would be kind of intentional monetary fraud against a fellow human being. So unintentional monetary fraud against God, because the idea is you better not be doing that intentionally. And then intentional monetary fraud against another human being. Okay, and that was just one example that I gave there, the goat example. Okay, so that was the guilt offering. Okay, and that completed the 5 types of offerings. If I had time, which I didn't this week, I was very busy with a bunch of stuff, then I really wanted to make a chart kind of summarizing everything. But we do have our spreadsheet that we've been working on, and we can continue to add to that. Okay, so those are the 5 types of offerings, usually translated as the burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. Okay, those are the words you're usually going to hear them translated as. Okay, however, let me close out Shlomo Carlebach here. However, we gave better translations based sometimes on whatever Fox translated it as, based sometimes on what Robert Alter translated it as, and some other places that we saw, some other translations or some other commentaries that we saw, to really express a bit more what each of these offerings is. And let me bring that spreadsheet up right now. Just give me a minute. 1 second, please. One second. One second. Okay, sorry about that. 1 second. Oops, cat wants to come in. Let me let the cat in. 1 second, everyone. Just give me a second here. Come here. Come here. Okay. Let me bring this up. Close this out. Bring this up here. And there's our spreadsheet. So we have to go to, oops, where is it? Where did it go? Tabernacle, sacrificial loss. There it is. Okay. So the first type of offering, which is usually translated as a burnt offering, we're calling it a holy burnt or a Holocaust offering. Second, just one more thing here, and then I should be back in business. Okay. The second type is a grain offering, but maybe I should really add that it's a grain by fire or grain fire. Put it in parentheses, grain by fire offering. Okay. The third is a peace or communion offering. The fourth, which is usually translated as a sin offering, we're calling it a recompense from inadvertent offense offering. Yeah, that's a mouthful, but that's really what it is: recompense from inadvertent offense or atonement from inadvertent offense. And the fifth is recompense for financial transgression or a guilt offering. Okay, so those are the 5 types of offerings. We're now going to pick it up in, so that finishes right here. That finishes in Leviticus chapter 6, verse 7. And now we go back to each of these types of offerings or some of the types of offerings, and we get a bit more information about them. Okay. So let's pick it up here. We're going to pick it up in Leviticus chapter 6, verse 8. I'll switch over to the Hebrew. Please follow along in Hebrew or in the language of your choice. Suggestions may be English, Spanish, Serbian, whatever you'd like to follow along in. And just, completely random suggestions. Wink, wink to my good friend. So let's pick it up. Okay. I'm going to switch over to the Hebrew, and we're going to pick it up in Leviticus chapter 6, verse 8. And we'll continue making our spreadsheet here. And again, I want to point out to anyone, if you want access to the spreadsheet, you're more than welcome to get it. Just write me a private message, and I will send you a link to the spreadsheet. It will be view only access. You won't be able to add to it, but you'll be able to see it. And there's a whole bunch of things there's a whole bunch of different, tabs or different sub spreadsheets that we have here, which have covered a lot of the Torah studies we've been doing for the past couple of years. Okay, so we're going to pick it up now in Leviticus chapter 6, verse. Let's see. Verse 8. Okay, so now we're going back to that first offering. Okay, that holy burnt or that Holocaust offering, and we're going to get some more laws regarding it. Okay, some, shall we say, peripheral laws. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Okay, so we're in verse 8 here. Wa'idaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor. Speak to, or I'm sorry, Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Sao et Aharon wa et banao lemor zot Torat ha ola hi ola al mokta al hamizbeach kol halayla ad haboker wa ish hamizbeach gad bo. So command Aaron and his sons, meaning the Kohanim, and say, Zot Torah Olah. This is the instructions, the set of instructions regarding the Olah. Regarding the Olah is the Hebrew word for the burnt offering or the holy burnt or the Holocaust offering, that first type of offering, right? We're going back and dealing with it now, okay? And maybe an important thing to point out here is that we have the word Torah, right? This is the Torah of the burnt offering, okay? And we see here that the word Torah, as it almost always is, except when we perhaps get to the book of Deuteronomy, but Torah usually does not mean the Torah as we call it today. It doesn't mean all 5 books of Moses. It means a set of instructions regarding a certain topic, regarding a certain issue. Okay. In this case, this is a set of instructions regarding the Olah, regarding the holy burnt, the Holocaust offering. Okay. So he Olah al Mukta al Mizbeach kol halayla ad haboker. Okay. This burnt offering, or this holy burnt offering, should be on its mukta, on its how would you translate this? I think they translate usually as hearth or something like this. Let's see how they translate it here. Yep, they translate it as hearth. What the heck does a hearth means? Nobody knows. I think some people think it means a car you take a dead person away in, but no, the hearth means the fire pit, the fire, the burning fire, shall we say? Okay, the fireplace or the concentration of the fire. Okay, in modern Hebrew, a moked means how would you say in English again? Like a headquarters or like a central region where orders are given out from. Okay, I forgot that word in English, but at any rate, it doesn't matter. Okay, what it means here is like where the fire is concentrated. Okay, the pyre, maybe the hearth. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a better translation, but that's what I can come up with right now. Let's maybe get Everett Fox. I'll probably say hearth as well. Anyway, you get the idea. So it's going to burn on this, on this fire, on this fire pit. Ala Mizbeach, which is on the Mizbeach is the altar of sacrifice. Okay, which Everett Fox translates as the slaughter table. Okay, the place where all the burnt sacrifices or burnt offerings are thrown. So it's going to be the concentration of fire, the burning fire, which is on the altar of sacrifice. Let's again get a visualization on that. And we'll do a map of the tabernacle just to explain exactly what we're talking about. I think this is the one we've been using. Open a new tab, if that works. Good. And then I can just blow it up like that. Okay, so this right here, the brazen altar or the altar of sacrifice. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Okay, so that's where the holy burnt, that's where the fire offering, I'm sorry, the burnt offering is going to burn, and it's going to burn on the concentration of fire, on the fire pit, which is on that altar, kol halayla, all night long, ad haboker, until the morning. Okay, this word boker is a very specific point in time. It's the time when the sun peaks out over the eastern horizon. It basically means sunrise, boker. It means when the sun starts to shine. Okay, morning. It's usually translated as morning, and let's see how they translate here. I'm assuming it's morning. Until the morning, okay? And the fire which is on the altar shall be burnt or shall be burning upon it. Okay. In other words, what this is trying to say is that whenever you take a burnt offering, a holy burnt offering, then you're going to throw it on the altar. Okay. And it's supposed to burn on the altar all night long until the morning. You don't take it off. You don't have to throw it on at night. You can throw it on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but you leave it on the altar until the morning. Okay? You don't take it off before the next morning because it's a fully burnt, it's a holy burnt offering. That means it has to be burnt to a crisp. It has to be turned basically into ash before it is removed from the altar. Okay? 1 second here, please. Okay. All right. Then we're in verse 10. Again, follow along in English if you'd like. Lavash kohen mido bad ומכנסי בד ילבש על בשרו והרים את הדשן אשר תאכל האש את העולה על המזבח ושמו אצל המזבח. So now the Kohen, so in the morning we're talking about, so this burnt offering this holy burnt offering has been burning holy, right? It's being completely burnt up on the altar all night long. Okay, think of it as like a hamburger. If you leave it on the grill all night long, okay, then in the morning it's going to be a pile of ash. And it says Lavasha Kohen, and this is not talking about the Kohen Gadol. This is talking about one of the assistant Kohens, one of the assistant priests. He puts on his uniform or his clothing, his garment of bad, his linen garment, and his linen underpants. Okay, and if we went back, I'm not going to do it right now, but we went back and we looked at the dress that the regular Kohen has, not the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol has a special dress or special uniform, shall we say? Let's look at it again. Let's get a picture here. Okay, clothes of the Kohen Gadol. Okay, so this is what the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, puts on. Okay, it's not a very good quality picture. Let's get this one here. Okay, he's got a whole bunch of stuff going on, which we spoke about when we learned Exodus. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing right now, but a whole bunch of different layers. He's got the ephod, he's got the choshen mishpat, he's got the tzitz, he's got the mitznefet, he's got the he has the me'il, and then he has the undergarment, and then he has underpants underneath. But the regular Kohen, not the Kohen Gadol, okay, garments of a regular Kohen. Images. Let's see. Yeah, I think that should do it. Okay, the garments of an ordinary priest. So he has just the belt. He has this long white robe. He has a turban, and then underneath he has basically underpants because his private parts are not allowed to be exposed as he walks up the ramp on the altar of sacrifice. So that's what we're talking about. So basically, he puts on his clothes, his Levitical clothes. Okay. Yilbash al besaro, so he places it on his body, on his flesh. Yirim et deshen, and he removes or lifts up literally the ashes. Asher tuchala esh et haolah, which the fire, which has been caused by the fire consuming the fully burnt offering. So that's it. His morning has come. The Kohen, the regular Kohen, he puts on his white robe. He puts on his uniform, basically, and he takes the ashes that are left from this holy burnt offering. And remember, we're not talking about a hamburger here, okay? We're talking about a bull. We're talking about an entire cow, okay, or an entire male bull, okay? So it takes a while for this thing to burn up. But by the morning time, and that's why it has to be left on the altar all night long, because we don't bring sacrifices at night. Sacrifices are only brought in the day or in the evening. At night, everything is just left to burn until the morning, and it's going to take until the morning for this sacrifice to turn into ashes. And it has to turn into ashes. Why? Because it's a burnt offering. It's a holy burnt offering. It's a Holocaust offering. Everything has to turn into ashes, and that's in fact where we get the word Holocaust in its more known sense in this day and age, which means what happened to the Jews in World War II, Holocaust, because everything, all of the Jews were turned into ash, right? The whole community was essentially of Europe, at least parts of Europe that were controlled by the Nazis or influenced by the Nazis, were completely wiped out. They were wholly turned into ash. And that's what's happening here with this burnt offering, with this Holocaust offering, okay? The whole thing by the morning is turned into ash. the Kohen in the morning, once the sun rises, he puts on his uniform and he picks up the ashes. He gathers up the ashes. Okay. Okay, these ashes that were created by the Holocaust offering, by the holy burnt offering, which are on the altar of sacrifice. And he places them next to the altar of sacrifice. Okay, so again, here's the altar of sacrifice right here. He's going to go, and this is a pretty big altar, right? You can walk up to it. There's a ramp that goes up to the top of it. He goes there. He gathers up the ashes from the cow or the bull that has now been completely turned into ashes, and he places them next to that altar of sacrifice in the morning once the sun rises, after everything has been turned to ash. Okay, verse 11, and we'll add this to the spreadsheet in a couple of minutes. Verse 11, ופשט את בגדיו ולבש בגדים אחרים והוציא את הדשן אל מחוץ למחנה אל מקום טהור. So now he's going to take off those clothes and he's going to put on other clothes. And even though it doesn't say so, I would imagine that this implies just another, more of the same. It's not a different uniform. It's just clean clothes. Because why? When he was gathering up the ashes, for sure, his white robe got dirty. His clothes got dirty. Now he's gathered up the ashes off of the altar. He was on top of the altar, right? Standing on basically a giant barbecue. And he's gathered up the ashes. He's full of ash. And so his clothes have gotten dirty. That's not appropriate. So he takes off those clothes and he puts on other clothes, clean clothes, the same uniform, I'm assuming, and I'm sure the commentaries will back that up if we wanted to look at them. The same uniform, again, it's that white robe, the white underpants, the belt, the turban, okay? And then he's going to take, okay, and he takes the ashes to outside of the camp, el makom tahor, to a clean place, a ritually pure place is the way it's usually understood. What does this mean, a ritually pure place? A place that has not been contaminated by any kind of ritual impurity. So we saw this before when we were talking about the sin offering. When there's a sin offering that is offered for I believe it was the Kohen Gadol and also the entire congregation, then the ashes from that sin offering are taken outside of the camp and they're placed in basically the ash pile. There's an ash pile outside of the camp. When the Israelites were in the desert, and of course this means outside of the entire Israelite camp. When we're talking about Jerusalem, then the ash pile probably just means off of the Temple Mount. I don't know. I'd have to look it up to see exactly what the various commentaries say. But somewhere away from the temple, okay, somewhere outside of that area of where the sacrifices are brought, and it goes out to this ash pile, which is outside the camp. And this ash pile, again, is a ritually clean, a ritually pure place. We haven't even gotten to the point in Leviticus, which speaks about ritual purity and ritual impurity, which is maybe the second after the details of the actual sacrifices themselves. That's perhaps the second most important or the second most central issue in the book of Leviticus, what's often called ritually impure or ritually clean, and I'm sorry, ritually impure, ritually unclean, or ritually pure / ritually clean. Okay, we'll get to that when and if we get to it. But at any rate, takes it outside of the camp. He takes the ashes, gathers the ashes, brings them outside the camp, and puts them on this ritually clean or this ritually pure ash pile outside of the camp. Okay, verse 12. وَهَאِש عَلَى مِزْبَخ גד בו לא תכבה וביער עליה הכהן עצים בבוקר וערך עליה עולה והתיר עליה חלבי השלמים. So the fire which is on the altar of sacrifice, gadbo, will burn away upon it. Lo tichbeh, and it will never go out. It will not go out. It will not be extinguished. Ubi'er alea kohen etzim, and the kohen will add wood to the fire. Okay, this is a very important word, which we won't get into now, but it's the same word that's used in Leviticus chapter 35, verse 3, when it speaks about not burning, when it says do not kindle a fire, do not burn a fire throughout all of your habitations on the Sabbath day. It's the same word that is used there as is being used here. And so we won't go down that rabbit hole right now and talk about exactly what it might mean, but from the context here, it's very clear. Okay, the Kohen is going to burn wood on top of the altar, so that the fire never goes out. Basically, the fire is not to go out. Okay, baboker each morning. So each morning, I'll sum up in a second. Let me just continue here. Each morning, okay, waraf aleha ola waitir, and he's going to arrange the burnt offerings upon the wood. Waitir aleha and chalbei shlamim, and he's going to go up and smoke the fats of the peace offerings, or of the, what are we calling them? The shlamim. We're calling them the communion offerings. These are the third types of offerings that we spoke about in Leviticus chapter 3. Okay, so let me explain what's going on. Okay, but let me just finish off verse 13, and then I'll kind of sum up and explain what's going on. Ish tamid tukad al hamizbeach lo tikhbeh. Fire will always be burning on the altar. It will never go out. The idea of the fire on the altar is it should never go out. It's an eternal flame. Okay, when you go into the synagogue, they have something. If you ever have gone into a rabbinical synagogue, even a reform or a conservative rabbinical synagogue, you'll see that they usually have something called a ner tamid. A ner tamid is the eternal flame. Okay, the eternal flame is supposed to represent actually the menorah. Where's the menorah? The menorah is over here, what they're calling the holy candlestick. But the menorah actually only is lit at night and goes out in the morning. So it's not a very good representation of an eternal flame. Many people think that this menorah, this holy candlestick that's inside the holy area, this is the tent of meeting, the Ohel Moed. Inside it is the menorah, okay, the gold menorah, the holy candlestick as they're calling it here. But the fire is only lit at night, and it's put out in the morning. It's let to burn out in the morning. It's put out in the morning. Okay, why? Because we don't need a candlestick burning during the day. It's actually kind of, I would say, almost disrespectful, right? To have candles burning during the day inside God's tent. It's I don't know why I think it's disrespectful, but I don't know. Something tells me it's disrespectful. Whatever. So, but what is to be constantly burning is the altar, the flame on the altar, the fire on the altar is never to go out, because that represents Yahweh's, that represents God's presence among the Israelites. Okay, that there's constantly sacrifices, constantly fire burning on the altar from one day to the next, to the next, to the next, that never goes out. That represents the longevity or the permanence of Yahweh's living among the Israelites. And where does he live? As we've said many times, he lives right here in the Holy of Holies. He doesn't live there, but what's called the Kavod Yahweh, the glory of Yahweh, lives between the cherubim on the cover of the Ark of the Covenant, which is inside the Holy of Holies, which is inside the tent of meeting, which is inside the courtyard of the tabernacle, later the Holy Temple, which is ultimately placed on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, in the land of Israel. Okay? That's the way the setup is. Okay? So that's the idea. That's basically what's going on here. So we have a routine that's going on. Okay? So the burnt offerings, if burnt offerings are to be brought, they're to be brought during the day, or maybe even it says here during the morning, I think it implies. Okay? The burnt offerings, the holy burnt offerings are let's go through the process again. Let's start here and just sum up, okay? Let's start in the morning. Okay, so in the morning, where are we? Okay, let's start here actually, okay? So in the morning, what does the Kohen do? Let's start actually over here. Okay. So in the morning, the first thing the Kohen does is he removes the ashes of the burnt offerings from the previous day. They've burnt all night long. They're all turned into ash. He goes up onto the altar wearing his Kohanic clothing. He removes the ashes. He places them next to the altar. Then he changes into clean clothing. He gathers up those ashes and he brings them outside the camp into the ash pile, which is a ritually pure place outside the camp. What's the next thing he does? He takes wood, he throws it onto the altar. Where is it? Okay, and each morning he takes wood, he throws it onto the altar on top of the fire to make sure that the fire keeps going continuously. And then he takes more burnt offerings and he throws those burnt offerings, including and especially the what we call the forbidden fats, those forbidden fats. Why are they called forbidden fats? They're forbidden for us as humans to eat. That's the food of God. Just like the food of the gods is ambrosia. We all learned that and when we learned Greek mythology in high school. If we grew up in the United States, that's the food of those false gods in Greek mythology. But the food of the real living God, of Yahweh, the quote unquote food, because obviously he doesn't eat, okay? But the quote unquote food that causes a sweet smelling scent, which he quote unquote smells, okay? That is what we're calling the forbidden fats. Why are they called forbidden fats? Forbidden for us to eat them. That's the ambrosia of the Torah. They're foods of the God, forbidden for us mortals to eat them. Okay, we only give them to God, and if it's not part of a sacrifice, then we discard them. We're not allowed to eat them. That's the food of our God. Okay, so those forbidden fats, and in this case, since it's a holy burnt offering, the rest of the whole burnt offerings, the new burnt offerings for that day, are thrown onto the top of the fire, which has now been replenished by new wood in the morning, and then the process continues itself. Okay, and so the fire never goes out. It has wood placed on it in the morning to keep the fire going. Then the burnt offerings, the burnt sacrifices of those days, the holy burnt sacrifices of that day, that takes until the next morning for everything to turn into ashes. Then the Kohen goes up, removes the ashes, takes them ultimately out of the camp onto the ritually pure ash pile, puts more wood to keep the flame going, and then throws the new burnt offerings for that day onto the altar. And then the process repeats itself day after day after day after day after day. And that fire on the altar is to never go out. That represents the eternity, or that represents the permanence of Yahweh living among us, living among Israel. Okay? All right. So, I don't know what the JPS reads, but usually the NIV is, sorry to say, since it's actually a Christian translation, but usually the NIV is quite accurate, except when it sneakily injects some Jesus stuff in there. But other than that, I think the NIV is a pretty good translation, and it's pretty colloquial. It's kind of easy to wrap your head around. It doesn't use any kind of obscure, or antiquated language. Okay, so that's the process. That's the burnt offering. Okay, fire always on the altar, right here. Burnt offerings, ashes of yesterday's burnt offerings gathered up, taken outside the camp. In the morning, more wood placed to keep that fire always going, and then the new burnt offerings thrown on top, which by the next morning will turn into ash. And that happens again, day after day after day after day after day. Okay? Any questions, any comments before we go on to the next paragraph? Let's see. So Itan Evior says, it's crazy the altar was made of shittim wood and was overlaid with brass and could withstand heat like that. I guess that's a good point. But if it's overlaid with brass, I mean, the wood is not going to, it's not going to affect the wood, right? If it's overlaid with brass, it'll be protected. It's not going to burn. Bible Hub says, JPS says, okay. Alrighty. Any questions, any comments before we move on? Interesting stuff? I hope so. I really hope so. When we see the whole system working together, it becomes that much more interesting, in my opinion. Okay. All right. Give me 1 second here. Second, please. Sorry about this. Okay. So we're going to now move on to the grain offering. So what is the set of instructions regarding the grain offering? Let's see. And I didn't add to the spreadsheet. Maybe I will later. Maybe I won't. I'm not sure. I just kind of want to move ahead a little bit and not get bogged down with adding to the spreadsheet. I don't know. We'll see if there's enough time to. Okay. So we're now in Leviticus chapter 6, verse 14. And Wizot Torat Haminha. This is the set of instructions. Again, here we have the word Torah. Torah, except perhaps in the book of Deuteronomy, does not mean the Torah, as we call it today. Once again, whenever you see the word Torah, it means a set of instructions regarding regarding a specific topic or a specific subject. It means an instruction manual. Maybe that's a good translation. This is the instruction manual for the grain offering. So we're going in order. Remember, we spoke about the 5 types of offering: the burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. We did the burnt offering, or we went back and got more laws about the burnt offering. Now we're going to go back to the grain offering and get more laws regarding the grain offering. Okay. Akrev ota b'nei Aaron lifnei Yahweh el pnei hamizbech. So Aaron brings it close to the face of the altar of sacrifice. Okay. So what are we talking about here? Let's just sum up again what Aaron is doing. So I want to bring a grain offering to Yahweh, and I have a number of different ways to do it. I could bring just a basket of grain or a just flour basically. I can bring unleavened matzah baked in an oven. I can bring unleavened bread baked on a griddle like a tortilla. I can bring unleavened bread baked in a frying pan, let's say like a pancake. No, pancake's not a good idea because it has leavening agent, but same idea, basically like a tortilla, but maybe thicker. Okay, and I bring it, and this is what I want to bring as an offering to Yahweh, and this is what happens to it. So the sons of Aaron, again meaning one of the Kohanim, right? Not the chief, not the high priest, one of the priests, brings it or causes it to approach. Here, let's go back to the translation. Offer, I don't like it. Basically, brings it to right before the altar of sacrifice. Okay, so basically goes up to this altar of sacrifice, okay, right near, and has a grain offering. So let's pretend again it's a loaf of unleavened bread. Okay, then he's going to bring it right here to the altar of sacrifices. Okay, verse 15. Weherim imenu bekumtso misolet hamintcha ומשמנה ואת כל הלבונה אשר על המנחה והתיר המזבח ריח ניחוח אז קראתה ליהוה. Okay, so here we're talking about misolet mincha. So we're talking about the first type of grain offering. Okay, let's go back for 1 second to Leviticus chapter 2. No, I don't have to go back. The first type of grain offering, so there are different types of grain offerings that we said you can bring. You can bring a basket of flour, and this is what this is speaking about, okay? And if you remember that basket of flour, let's look back here, okay? So if you want to bring a loose flour offering, it must be of top quality flour and must be offered with olive oil and frankincense, okay? This is reviewing chapter 2. The Kohen takes a 1 handful as a representation, memorial of the oil-soaked flour along with all the frankincense and burns it on the altar as a sweet-smelling fire to Yahweh, fire offering to Yahweh. The rest goes to the Kohanim. It is holy of holies among the fire offerings. And then it goes on to other types of fire offerings, baked in an oven, made in a pan. And I think we didn't finish, but then after it is made on a griddle, okay? So we're talking about this first type, okay, a loose flour offering. Okay, so basically it's a basket of flour, of top quality flour. Okay. So verse 15, so the Kohen is going to use one of his hands and take a handful of it, single handful, not a double handful, from the flour of the grain offering, umishmana, and from its oil. And we saw here that the oil is mixed in with the flour. So you're basically mixing the flour in with the oil, or maybe just pouring the oil on top of the flour. So you're basically taking this flour mixed with fine olive oil, with top quality olive oil. The Kohen is taking 1 handful of this, okay? And all of the frankincense, because remember frankincense is put on top of it. Asher ala mincha, which is on top of the grain offering, of the loose flour offering. Viktir hamizbeach reach nichoch as karata liyahweh, and he's going to throw it onto the altar to make it go up in smoke as a sweet smelling scent as a memorial to Yahweh. What does that mean as a memorial to Yahweh? We saw this in chapter 2. This means that it's not the whole basket of flour that's going on the altar. It's this handful represents a memorial portion. Okay, it represents a symbolic portion of the entire grain offering that is thrown on the altar along with the oil that's mixed into it and along with all of the frankincense. And this is God's portion. This is Yahweh's portion. That's called askarata. It's a memorial portion. Okay, it basically means the portion, the handful of the entire offering that's thrown on the altar. That's called the memorial portion. Okay, because it's kind of a symbolic, memorial of the entire offering that goes onto the altar and is given to Yahweh as what? As a reach nichoach, as a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. Okay, let's go on. Verse 19. Wahanoteret mimena yochlu Aharon ubanao. Let's go up to there. This is our first half of the verse. When we see this little wishbone symbol called an atnach or an nachta, then this means it's basically semicolon. Most verses in the Tanakh are broken down into two versets, into two subverses, and we can almost treat them as different sentences, or you can think of this etnach as a semicolon, and often it completes a single thought. Okay, so the rest of it. So we have this memorial portion, this handful that goes onto the altar, and the rest, mimena yochlu Aaron ubanav, is will be eaten, or Aaron and his sons will eat it. In other words, they could take the rest of that grain offering, and that's their food, that's their salary, that's their recompense. Okay, that's their gift. Because remember, Aaron, the tribe of Levi, does not have an inheritance in the land of Israel. Okay, they get their salary from their Levitical cities. That's the only property they have, and it's not part of their own tribal territory. It's within the tribal territories of the other tribes, or within the territories of the other tribes. And then, since they don't have their own territory, they can't raise their own crops or take care of their own livestock, because they just don't have the area to do that. So their portion, their salary, comes from all of Israel, and that is those are the gifts to the Kohanim from the various sacrifices, from the tithes, and a couple of other things which we'll get to eventually. Okay, so whatever's left over, so the memorial portion, the handful is thrown onto the altar. The rest of it is eaten. Doesn't mean immediately is eaten. Is put aside to be eaten by Aharon and his sons. In other words, by the priests, by the Kohanim. That's their salary. That's their portion. Okay, I don't like to use the word salary because it's not exactly payment for what they're doing. It's more like their gift. Okay, for being the ones who are so close to Yahweh as to be ministering in his tent of meeting, or near his tent of meeting, in his tabernacle / temple, then that is their portion. That is their gift. Okay. Okay, so that portion that goes to Aaron's sons. Okay, matzot te'achel b'makom kadosh b'hatzar ohel moed yochluha. So first of all, it points out that these are matzot. These are unleavened fire offerings. Okay, let me just read this again. Mimenu yochlu Aaron ubanav matzot te'achel b'makom kadosh. 1 second. Yeah. Okay. So I'm assuming that this is what this is talking about, is the other types of grain offerings. So the first grain offering was the loose flour offering. Okay, but then we had the other ones. we had unleavened bread that was baked in the oven, unleavened bread that was made on the griddle, unleavened bread that was made on the frying pan. So this is speaking about those other types. Okay. So matzot, unleavened bread. We know what matzah is. We have Passover coming up this week. And by the way, I'll talk about the schedule for Passover at some time. I've decided not to do an online Seder because I've come to the conclusion that I don't like it. I actually can't stand online Seders. The only way a Seder really works is if everyone's sitting together at the same table singing. Okay, if 2 people are here and 2 people are there, and we're all doing it over Zoom and we're all trying to eat a meal, it just doesn't work. So I'm not going to do that. What I probably will do is do a Passover study. Probably on the first day of Passover, which means that will be on the 24th. Is that the right date? Starts this Tuesday night. Let me just see here. Do a calendar society. Right. So it starts Tuesday night. So probably Wednesday day, I'll do some kind of Passover study. Okay. Maybe we'll go through the Haggadah a bit. Maybe we'll talk about, do like a question and answer study. regarding the festival of unleavened bread, Hakham. But I'm not going to do. A number of people have asked, "Are you doing an online seder?" I don't like them. I've tried them in the past. They just don't work. Okay. What I really want to do, and I don't want to give away my plans yet, but this may be sooner rather than later, is to set up an actual Karaite community in Israel, and then we can actually be doing Passover seders in person, and all sitting at the same table, and then a Passover seder becomes a beautiful thing. But if it's done over Zoom or done over this, done over that, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So, but if you guys want to get together and do a Passover Seder, if someone wants to organize it, please feel free, be my guest. But I'm not going to organize it this year. I've tried it in the past, and it just doesn't work. So more details about that. Oops, I have to plug in a couple minutes. More details about that in the coming days. But that's probably what's going to happen. There'll probably be a Wednesday day study. That's the plan. Okay. All right. So where were we? So again, the only types of, aside from the loose grain, which is obviously not leavened bread, okay, from the loose flour, it's obviously not leavened bread because nothing's been added to it except oil, and then frankincense has been put on top of it. The only other types of grain offerings you're allowed to offer are unleavened bread. Okay, we saw explicitly in chapter 2 that any grain offering that is a fire offering, in other words, where a memorial portion of it, where a handful or a piece of it is thrown onto the altar, the sacrificial altar, that it cannot be leavened bread. It must be unleavened bread. And we saw also that it says no leavening agent and no honey will go onto my altar. And we spoke about why does it say leavening agent and honey? Well, leavening agent in ancient times, there was no such thing as going to the store, the Piggly Wiggly, and picking up yeast from the refrigerator. No, people used sourdough starter, right? Same way for anyone who's made sourdough bread, you gather some of the dough before you put it in the oven, and that becomes the base. That becomes a starter for the next batch of sourdough bread. Okay, so that's what leavening agent was in ancient times. It causes because it's concentrated yeast. Not only yeast, actually, it's bacteria in there as well. But because it's concentrated, it's a concentrated leavening agent. It acts as a starter for the next batch of dough. The yeast and the bacteria spread very quickly throughout the dough, and that allows the next batch of dough to rise. So that's not allowed to be on there. And we also saw honey. Why is honey mentioned as part of leavened bread? And we said that because the honey, like for anyone who's made bread in this day and age, how do you wake up the yeast? You throw it in warm water and you add some sugar, or sometimes you add milk. Milk is actually full of simple sugars, so it acts the same way. Okay. And basically what it is, it's food for the yeast / bacteria to get the process, turbocharged, or to get the process started. Okay. So we saw that no leavened bread is allowed to be part of a grain offering that goes onto the altar of sacrifice. And so that's what's mentioned here. Those other types, not the loose flour, but those other types, whether it's baked in the oven, made on the griddle, or made in a frying pan, they must be unleavened. No leavening agent, no honey to feed the yeast, to feed the leavening agent, completely unleavened bread, matzah. Matzot, we all know what matzah is, okay? Even the average American, I don't know about the average American, but many Americans even know what matzah is, right? Matzah, okay? So, ubanav, these other types of grain offerings, which are unleavened bread, te'achel b'makom kadosh, they have to be eaten in a holy place. Where? That's now clarified here. B'chatzar ohel moed yochluha. In the courtyard of the tent of meeting, they shall eat it. Okay, so we have a bunch of information here. The memorial portion is thrown onto the altar of sacrifice. Goes up in smoke. Okay, makes a sweet smelling scent. The frankincense, the flour, and the oil makes a sweet smelling scent. The rest is given as food to the Kohanim, but they must eat it in the courtyard of the tent of meeting, the courtyard of the tabernacle, and in this holy place. So where are they to eat it? Only within the confines of this entire courtyard here, right? These poles, and well, we don't see from the top, but the curtains that go around this represents the border of the courtyard of the tent of meeting. This is the tent of meeting here. The tent is on the inside, and this is the courtyard surrounding it. Okay, so the Kohanim can only eat it within the confines of the courtyard of, in fact, it says here the tabernacle court, within the confines of the courtyard of the tabernacle, okay, of the tent of meeting. Okay, so that's where they must eat it. Okay, let's go on to verse 17. Lo te'afeh hametz halkam natati otan me'ishai kodesh kedoshim hi ke'hatat u'ke'asham. Okay. So lo te'afeh hametz. So leavened bread, the opposite of matzah is chametz. Matzah is unleavened bread, and its polar opposite. Its opposite. Oops, I got to plug in a second. Is chametz. So chametz will not be baked. In other words, it's saying that it's saying that leavened bread is not allowed to be used as a grain offering, or more specifically, a grain offering, which is a fire offering. Okay, grain offering, a portion of which is thrown on the altar of sacrifice. Okay, Hakham Melech me'ishai, and their portion I've given to them from my fire offerings. Okay, and this is speaking about, if I'm not mistaken here, it's a little bit ambiguous, but this is speaking about the Kohanim. So their portion, the portion that goes to the Kohanim, or this is the portion that I've given to the Kohanim or this is what I've given of my fire offerings to the Kohanim. Basically, what it's saying is that the leftover grain offering, the part that doesn't go onto the altar, that is the gift, or that is a salary. Again, I don't like to use the word salary, but that's a salary that goes to the Kohanim. Okay, Kodesh Kodoshim, it is holy of holies. He, okay, kechatat kasham, just like the what? The sin offering and the guilt offering. Okay, so just like two other types of offering. Again, what are our 5 types of offerings? The burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. So just like the sin offering and the guilt offering, okay, this is holy of holies. And holy of holies is kind of an ambiguous term, believe it or not, but it's not clear exactly technically what that means, but it means it's very holy. Let's put it that way. Okay. So like these other 2 types of sacrifice, this grain offering, which you may think maybe it's not as holy, right? It's just grain after all. It's not a bull. It's not a goat. It's not a sheep. It's just a piece of bread, right? It's just a loaf of bread. Well, it's just as holy as these other types of animal sacrifices. Okay. And every male among the sons of Aaron shall eat it. So this excludes the females. Now the females are allowed to eat other foods, obviously that are given to the Kohanim, such as the tithes, because that goes to the entire household of the Kohanim. But in this case, since it's an actual sacrifice, since it's actually thrown on the altar of sacrifice, this is only to be eaten by the males. Okay, kol zachar b'bnei Aaron yochlena. So every male among the children of Aaron, so every male priest may eat it. And this makes sense because the priests were all male. This has to be eaten within the courtyard of the tabernacle. Okay, within the courtyard of the tabernacle, women were allowed, but as far as I know, but the ones officiating were the male Kohanim. Okay, so the ones who are doing the officiating, they're the ones who are receiving this, and they're the only ones who can eat it. They can't give it to their other family members. They can't give it to the women, and this also may imply the children as well. Okay, so kol zachar b'bnei Aaron yochlenu chak chok olam ledorotechem. This is an eternal statute throughout your generations. Me'ishei Yahweh, from regarding the fire offerings of Yahweh. And anyone who touches them becomes holy. Okay, so what does that mean? We'll try to get a little bit of commentary on that, because there is this idea of the passing of ritual impurity from one person to another. But here we have the opposite, that is the passing of holiness from one person to the other. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I have to plug in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on music for just a couple of minutes, and we will be back. Oops, history. Let's bring that back up. Actually, should I put on music? All right, I'll put on music.
Nay nay na 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 nay. Nay nay na nay. Nay nay na na nay. Hashem Melech. Hashem Malach. Hashem Yimloch. Leolam va'ed. Hashem Melech. Hashem Malach. Hashem Yimloch. Leolam va'ed. והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי ננאי 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 נאי נאי ננאי נאי 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 השם מלך השם מלך השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. השם מלך השם מלך השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, היום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי ננאי 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 נאי נאי ננאי נאי 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 אוי נאי 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 השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. ננאי 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 נאי 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 אוי נאי 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 שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ. אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אוי 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 שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך.
Okay, we're back. We're back. We're back. Let me get rid of this. Okay, so we're back. Let me share the screen again. No, that's not what I meant to do. There we go. Okay, so let's continue on. So now we have a little bit of a sidetrack. We're in Leviticus chapter 6:19. Actually, I just want to get a little bit of commentary on this. 6:18. Let me bring up my commentators. Go with our Robert Alter as usual. And again, we'll go with our Everett Fox for translation. Now we have to go to Leviticus. Leviticus, where are we? 6, right? 6:18. Leviticus 6:18. Leviticus 6:18. I think the numbering system here is different. Whatever is going off, it should not be eaten. Wait a second here. Huh? Something doesn't make sense here. Leviticus chapter 6. Teaching since return to smoke on fragrance. There's left an to eat. It shall not be baked leaven. As a share I've given in fine, this holy of holies. Okay, so there it is. So the numbering system is a little bit different here. Here it's 11, 611. So let's see here. We have to go to page 901. And we want to follow along here to verse 11. Okay, whatever touches them shall become holy. So it is also possible to, this is Robert Alter's commentary on it. It is also possible to construe the sentence as Baruch Levine does to mean whoever touches them shall be holy, i.e., no person is allowed to touch the flat cakes made from the grain offerings who is not holy or a member of the priestly caste. Jacob Milgram, however, makes a persuasive case on philological and other grounds. Remember, Jacob Milgram was, I think he's no longer with us, one of the leading experts on the book of Leviticus. However, makes a persuasive case on philological and other grounds that the reference is to objects rather than to persons. What is involved then is an idea some scholars have described as a contagion of holiness, symmetrical with the more common idea of a contagion of impurity, right? That's what we mentioned, that if someone's impure in certain circumstances and they touch another person, the other person acquires some level of ritual impurity. Objects that come in contact with consecrated substances, such as the grain offering themselves, become consecrated and can no longer be used for profane purposes. Okay. All right. Let's move on then to verse 19. So Yahweh spoke to Moses and said, Ze korban Aharon ubanaw asher yakrivu liYahweh b'yom himashach oto. So this is the offering of Aaron and his sons, asher yakrivu liYahweh, that they shall bring to Yahweh b'yom himashach oto, on the day that they are inaugurated, literally on the day that Himashach is on the day of their being anointed. Okay. So, in other words, when a new Kohen is anointed, okay, then they have to bring an offering. And what is this offering? Asirit, Haifa, Solet, Mincha, Tamid. So, could it be that? Wait, 1 second. I just want to see one thing here. Verse 20, or this is actually verse 12. Okay, so Asirit, the 10th of an ephah. An ephah is a dry measurement, kind of like a cup or something like that. Ephah solet mincha tamid, of fine flour as a perpetual grain offering. Machitzita b'boker, machitzita b'erev. So half of it in the morning, literally right after the sun rises, and half of it in the evening, literally right after the sun sets. Okay, and we'll get some commentary on this in just a second. Let's go on. Al mahvat b'shemen ke'aseh. It shall be done on a mahvat. Mahvat is usually translated as a pan or a frying pan. Okay, so it's to be done on a frying pan. So it's not baked in an oven. It's made like a tortilla almost. Okay, an unleavened tortilla or an unleavened flatbread on a pan. B'shemen, in oil. Ke'aseh. It shall be done. Murbechet tavi'ena. So murbechet. Murbechet is mixed, so it shall be brought mixed. Okay, meaning the oil and the flour are mixed together. Okay, tufine minchat pitim, and that is baked goods of pieces of bread as a grain offering. Takriv reach nichoch leYahweh. It shall be brought as a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. Okay, let's try to make a little bit of sense out of this verse here. First, let's get the Robert Alter translation. Okay. So this is the offering of Aaron and his sons, which they shall bring forward to Yahweh on the day he is anointed. A tenth of an ephah of semolina as a perpetual grain offering, half of it in the morning, half of it in the evening. On a griddle in oil it shall be done, soaked through you shall bring it. As a grain offering of baked pieces you shall bring it forward, a fragrant odor to Yahweh. Okay? And we can also look at Everett Fox on this. So this is again Leviticus 6. So this is going to be around page 120. Leviticus 6. Let's find it. Okay. So he translates it like this. This is the near offering of Aaron and his sons that they are to bring near to Yahweh at the time of his being anointed, a tenth measure of an ephah of flour as a regular grain gift, half of it in the morning and half of it in the evening. On a griddle with oil it is to be made, well stirred. You are to bring it as baked, crumbled bits of grain. You are to bring it near, a soothing savor for Yahweh. And we'll go on. Thus shall the priest anointed in his stead from among his sons sacrifice it. A law for the ages, for Yahweh, completely is to be turned into smoke. And every grain gift of a priest completely offered shall it be. It is not to be eaten. Okay, so this is speaking about. Actually, I think it's the Kohen Gadol, if I'm not mistaken, when a new high priest is inaugurated. These are the laws for the inauguration of the new high priest. Okay, and let's just read verse 22 here. V'Kohen HaMashiach tachtau mibanav ya'aseh ota hak olam. And the anointed Kohen, and yes, the anointed Kohen is speaking about the high priest. So the anointed Kohen, the one who has the anointing oil poured over his head, so that's the high priest, Tachtav, who reigns in his place, literally instead of him or underneath him, Mibanav, from among his sons, Ya'aseota, shall also bring it, Hokolam liyahweh, this is an eternal statute to Yahweh, Khalil Taktar, it shall be completely, completely go up in smoke. In other words, we spoke about grain offerings before. We know that grain offerings, most of the grain offering is given to the Kohen as his salary, as his portion. Only a handful, if it's loose flour, or a piece of it, if it's a loaf of unleavened bread, is thrown on the fire, and the rest is given to the Kohen. But this is different. This is the inauguration offering, the inauguration grain offering for the Kohen Gadol. So none of it is given to the Kohen to eat. All of it goes onto the altar. All of it goes to God. Okay. Okay. And every grain offering of a Kohen, or the implication is of the inauguration of a Kohen, it shall be completely offered, and it shall not be eaten. Okay, again, let's get a little bit of Robert Alter on that one, just to sum that up. Okay, and then we'll just move on. Okay, so and Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "This is the offering of Aaron and his sons, which they shall bring forth." No, let's do Everett Fox for change. Okay, Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "This is the near offering of Aaron and his sons that they are to bring near to Yahweh at the time of his being anointed." Okay, so this is again the Kohen Gadol, not all the Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol. A tenth measure of an ephah of flour as a regular grain gift, half of it in the morning, half of it in the evening. On a griddle with oil it is to be made, well stirred you are to bring it, meaning the flour and the oil are to be mixed together, almost like a pizza dough. As baked crumbled bits of grain you are to bring it, near, a soothing savor for Yahweh. Thus shall the priest anointed in his stead from among his sons sacrifice it, a law for the ages. For Yahweh, completely it is to be turned into smoke, and every grain gift of a priest, completely offered shall it be, it is not to be eaten. Okay? So we have here laws for the grain offering. And then we have special laws for this grain offering, which is brought on the day of the inauguration of the Kohen Gadol, of the high priest. Okay? What are the differences? Well, with a regular grain offering, we see that it's offered with oil and frankincense, and that a portion of it is thrown onto the altar of sacrifice, goes up in smoke on the altar of sacrifice, but that the rest of it is eaten by the Kohanim within the confines of the courtyard of the tabernacle, and that it's not to be chametz, that it's considered holy of holies, like the sin offering and like the guilt offering, that any male among the sons of Aaron may eat it, and that whatever touches it becomes sanctified. Whatever that means is a lot of different opinions as to what that really means, and we saw two of them when we read the Robert Alter commentary. So that's for regular grain offering. Those are the rules for the regular grain offering. But if it's a special grain offering, which is the grain offering brought when the new Kohen Gadol is installed, okay, the Kohen Mashiach, meaning Mashiach, that's the Hebrew word for Messiah, or the English word for Mashiach is Messiah, but Messiah literally means the anointed one, right? That's Jesus Christos. Again, I shouldn't even say this because people are going to think I'm a Christian or something like that. I'm just using it as to say what the word Christos means, okay? I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Messianic in any way, shape, or form. Never have been, am not now, never, ever, ever will be, okay? But I'm just saying that the word Christos, when you say Jesus Christ, it literally means Jesus, the anointed one, the one who has the anointing oil, because kings and the Kohen Gadol has the anointing oil poured over his head. So when the Christians say Jesus Christos or Jesus Christ, that means Jesus, the one who had the anointing oil poured over his head, because they believe he is the king of Israel, right? They believe he was meant to be the king of the Jews. Okay, so I'm just explaining what that word means. Okay, it's the Greek word Christos, which means anointed. Okay, is the same as the Hebrew word Himashach or Mashiach. Okay, the anointed one, the one who has the way you installed kings, the way you installed the Kohen Gadol is you poured oil, olive oil, fine, high, top quality olive oil over their heads. That was called anointing. Okay, like an ointment. This comes from the same word. And ointment. Okay, ointment means right. An ointment is like a greasy, oily, creamy kind of thing. An ointment, right? Anoint literally means to pour oil over. Okay, that's the way that kings and the high priest were installed in ancient times, or in ancient Israel and throughout the ancient Near East. Okay, so this is what this is saying. So on the day that the Kohen Gadol is anointed, has the anointing oil poured over his head, then he also brings this grain offering, which is a tenth of an ephah. Again, ephah is a unit of dry measure, much like we would say a cup of flour today or something like that. A cup is also obviously a liquid measure, but it's also a dry measure. Okay, so of fine flour, okay, as a grain offering. At any rate, half is brought in the morning, half is brought in the evening, and then it's made into a cake of unleavened bread on a frying pan, mixed well with oil, and then broken into pieces. And then it's brought as a sacrifice, as a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. And this is also to happen when a new Kohen Gadol is installed. This is an eternal statute, and all of it is burnt on the altar, as opposed to a regular grain offering where only a memorial portion is burnt on the altar, and then the rest is given to the Kohanim as their portion, as their salary. And all of it is a sacrifice in this case. All of it is thrown onto the altar. None of it is to be eaten. So this is in contrast to the regular grain offering, where only a portion of it is thrown onto the altar of sacrifice to go up in smoke. The rest is eaten by the Kohanim. In this case, if it's the anointing, if it's the grain offering that's brought as part of the inauguration process, as part of the anointing process of the new Kohen Gadol, of the new high priest, then all of it goes onto the altar. None of it is to be eaten by the Kohanim. Okay, so that sums that up. Uh-oh, are we frozen? Uh-oh, no, not yet. What's going on? No, we're not. Okay, so let's go on. It's already getting pretty late here. I'm only going to go, I think I'll go to the end of this chapter, then I'm going to have to stop. We started late today. I'm sorry about starting late today. We had a bit of an incident here, which I don't want to get into. really had nothing directly to do with me, but I got involved in it, but it doesn't matter. At any rate, so now we're going to go on to some of the laws of the sin offering. So we covered what? Extra laws about the burnt offering. We covered extra laws about the grain offering being broken down into the regular grain offering and the special grain offering that's brought for the inauguration of the high priest. And now we're going to go into that third type of offering that we saw in Leviticus chapter 3, and that's the sin offering, but we're not calling it the sin offering. We are calling it, oh, actually, I'm sorry. We didn't speak about the peace offering. In chapter 4 of Leviticus, the sin offering or the recompense from inadvertent offense offering. Well, that's a mouthful, so we'll just maybe call it the recompense offering or the inadvertent. I don't know what I'll call it. I'll call it the sin offering probably. Okay, let's go on to that, and we're going to learn some more laws regarding the sin offering that we learned about in Leviticus chapter 4. Okay? So Yahweh spoke to Moses and said, we're saying, to say, the ber el Aaron wa el banao, speak to Aaron and his sons, speak to the Kohanim, speak to the priests, lemor, zot Torat hatat. This is the instruction manual regarding the hatat, regarding the sin offering, regarding the recompense from inadvertent offense offering. Atonement for inadvertent, he is inadvertent offense. Okay, you committed a sin and you didn't know you did it, then you found out later, you bring a chatat, you bring a sin offering. If it's a financial crime against God, a financial indiscretion, I should say, against God, you were supposed to, let's say, tithe and you didn't, then that's not a sin offering, that's a guilt offering. If it's an intentional financial indiscretion or crime against another man, another human being, then that is also a guilt offering. Okay, chatat. So this is the sin offering, the inadvertent transgression. So in the place where the holy burnt, the Holocaust offering is slaughtered, so shall the sin offering be slaughtered. Now, where is the holy burnt offering slaughtered? For this, we have to go back here. I think it mentions it explicitly. Let's see. But the entrance of the hand, butchering animals, give it to Cohen, slaughter. Legs are washed in water. No, it doesn't say, but it just says, was it with the sin offering? Hold on a second. Peace. 1 second here. Okay, so I'm pretty sure what this means, if I'm not mistaken, going back over my notes here, is that it just means that it's slaughtered near the altar, okay, near the altar of sacrifice. Okay, maybe we can get a little commentary on that. Let's see. Speaking of offense, in the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered, the offense offering shall be slaughtered before Yahweh. So no commentary there, and I don't want to go track down the other commentaries. That's what it means. It basically means right near the altar of sacrifice in the courtyard. Okay, Yahweh, kodesh kodeshim he. Okay, so the same place is where the sin offering is going to be slaughtered, and it is holy of holies. We've seen this phrase a number of times. That phrase would require a little bit of study in and of itself. It's not really clear what that means, but we're just going to leave it as holy of holies for now. Verse 26. הכהן המחטא אותה יאכלנה במקום קדוש תאכל בחצר אוהל מועד. Okay. So for this sin offering, the Kohen המחטא אותה, so the Kohen who's basically bringing the sin offering, and let me just get a little bit of commentary here. So he translates it, Robert Alt, as a priest performing it as an offense offering shall eat it. And Everett Fox says, okay, place for offerings to slain, the priest who sacrifices the chatat offering is to eat of it. In a holy place is to be eaten in the courtyard of the tent of appointment. Okay, now let me just see something here. One second. It's a peace offering. That's a sin offering. 1 second. Takes the blood, rubs it, forbidden fat, 2 kidneys, the same fats, and the rest of the calf, including some of the skin, flesh, and so the camel burn. Blood, forbidden fats, forbidden the calf. No, it takes it out the camp and burns it in the same way. יאכלנה במקום קדוש, תאכל בחצר אוהל מועד. So basically the Kohen is going to eat a portion of it, but we saw in Leviticus chapter 4, that the rest of it is brought outside of the camp and is burned on the ash pile. Okay, let's go ahead a little bit. Anyone who touches his flesh shall become holy, whatever that means. We're not going to get into that right now. And anyone who sprinkles its blood upon his garments, that it is sprinkled upon, so that garment, it's now to be washed in a holy place, which again is going to imply that it's washed in that area in the courtyard of the tabernacle. So if you take the sin offering, okay, the Kohen is going to eat a bit of it. The rest is brought out of the camp and burned on the ash pile. And if any of its blood is sprinkled, or I guess maybe lands on the clothing, then that clothing becomes holy and it has to be washed within the courtyard of the temple. Okay? Verse 28. Okay, so if any of this sin offering is cooked in a earthenware vessel, basically pottery vessel, then it's to be broken. So you're only allowed to use it once for that sin offering. Afterwards, to be broken, because it's a negative offering. It's a sin offering. And if it's cooked in a bronze vessel, bushala, if it's cooked in a bronze vessel, morak then it is to be basically murak is like scrubbed really well. In fact, let me just take that 1 second. Scoured, polished. The BDB calls it scour or polish. Okay, so it's to be washed really well or scoured really well, and then it's to be rinsed in water. Okay, so the difference is that the klei cheresh, the earthenware vessel, is porous. Okay, so this sin offering, the blood, the meat, the drippings from the sin offering can sink right into that porous earthenware vessel. And so, since it's a negative offering, it has to be broken. It's destroyed after it comes in contact with the sin offering. The bronze vessel, however, is not porous. Bronze is not porous. Okay, and so therefore it can be just washed really well. It can be scrubbed and washed really well. Okay. So any of the males among the Kohanim can eat it. Kodeshim it is holy of holies. Okay. And any sin offering, okay. So any sin offering which from which part of its blood, or which a portion of its blood, is brought into the tent of meeting to make atonement within the holy area, should not be eaten ba'esh tesaref. So let's explain that. So for this, we really have to go back to Leviticus chapter 4, and I think we'll do that. We'll explain what's going on here, and then I think we're going to finish for the day because it is getting pretty late. So let's do that. Let me bring that up in the English just to make it flow a little bit more quickly. And let's try to figure out what's going on and then kind of sum up. Okay, so we're Leviticus chapter 4. Let me go over to the English. So the sin offering, remember, it's for inadvertent sins. It's for inadvertent transgressions, or transgressions against God's, against Yahweh's commandments. And there were a couple of types. There were 4 types, if I remember correctly, mentioned. The first is the Kohen Gadol, which they're calling here the anointed priest. Okay. So that's very serious because it affects the entire community. And what happens is that with this first type of sin offering, the blood is collected from the offering, and then the Kohen Gadol walks into the Holy of Holies, into this area here. Okay, walks up to this curtain which separates the holy from the Holy of Holies, and then sprinkles the blood from that sin offering onto the curtain of the Holy of Holies. Okay, that's type number 1, or that's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 is if the entire community sins inadvertently. Okay, they buy meat from some butcher, and he says it's kosher meat, and then it turns out it's horse meat, which has actually happened in the past. Then the entire community has sinned, but it was unintentional. And then they find out about it later. They call up the butcher and they said, "Hey, your meat was a little bit funny." He said, "Oh my God, I messed up. My Amazon deliveries got messed up, and I sent you the horse meat, and I sent the kosher beef to Mongolia," or something like that. Okay, so in that case, it's the same thing. A sin offering is brought, and part of the sin offering, the blood is collected from the sin offering and is sprinkled against that curtain. So these are the 2 more serious types. This is going basically from more serious to less serious. So if the Kohen Gadol sins, the entire community sins, again, inadvertently. Now we go down a leader among the community. So it's not the Kohen Gadol. This is not the entire community. It's a leader among the community. So in this case, since it's less serious, it's a leader, but it's not the Kohen Gadol, or it's not the entire community, then the blood is not sprinkled on that curtain. Okay, it's basically just poured out at the base of the altar, as we see here in Leviticus 4, chapter 25. Oh, and I should add that in these first 2 scenarios, okay, after the sin offering is cut up, okay, then he must take outside the camp to a place ceremonial clean where the ashes are thrown and burn it there in a wood fire on the ash heap. So in the first 2 scenarios, same thing here in verse 21, take the bull outside the camp and burn it as he burned the first bull. This is a sin offering for the community. So in these first 2 very serious scenarios, then that sin offering is never eaten by the Kohanim. It's all brought, aside from the forbidden fats, which are always thrown on the altar. The rest of it is brought outside of the camp and it's burned in that ash pile in that clean place that we spoke about when we were speaking about the I think it was the grain offering, was it? One of the other offerings. Okay. But in the 3rd and 4th cases, so the 3rd case again is a leader. Okay. So since this is less serious, it doesn't affect the entire community. It's just a leader, but it's not the Kohen Gadol. Or here it's any member of the community. Okay. Then the blood is not sprinkled against the curtain. It's only thrown at the base of the altar, and the rest of it, the rest of the that sin offering is not brought out, or I should say, not all of it is brought out and burnt on the ash pile. And that's our second scenario, which we'll go right now back to Leviticus 6 and tie these 2 chapters together. The same thing for when everybody sins. Okay, I'm sorry, for when a member of the community, just a lay Israelite, sins, okay, inadvertently, then it's the same thing. Okay, it's thrown. In this case, I'm sorry, in both cases, is rubbed on the, where is it? Sort of for the Lord, set up in the priest to the blood. Right. It's rubbed on the horns of the altar, and the rest of the blood is poured out at the base of the altar. The same thing here, but it's not brought into the Holy of Holies. It's not brought into the holy area and sprinkled against that curtain. Okay. So that's the 2 scenarios we're talking about here in Leviticus 6. Okay. We have 2 different scenarios. And in the first scenario, this is talking about the second 2 cases, the less serious cases from Leviticus 4. So any member of the community or a leader. Okay. So in this case, again, blood is not brought into the holy area, and it's not sprinkled against this curtain here. So in that case, now if we go back to Leviticus 6, then to sum up, then the Kohen can eat a portion of it. Okay, or he eats it basically. Yes. So it's eaten. Okay. But the other type, v'chol chatat, I'm going to go now to verse 30, v'chol chatat asher yuva midama el oel moed. But any of the sin offerings from which it's a portion of it's part of its blood is brought into the tent of meeting, and that again is implying those two more serious, talking about those two more serious types of sin offering, either a sin offering, inadvertent sin by the Kohen Gadol, or an inadvertent sin by the entire community. Then the blood is brought in, sprinkled against this curtain. Okay, so in that case, we go back to Leviticus 6. Okay, so any of those two first scenarios, the more serious scenarios, so lo, it shall not be eaten, it is to be burnt in fire. Okay, so for those first two scenarios, the more serious ones, no portion of it is eaten, it's not eaten, it's all taken outside of the camp and it's burnt onto that in that ash heap. But in the less serious types, if it's a member, if it's a leader among the community or just a lay Israelite who has to bring the sin offering, who's inadvertently sinned and now has to bring an offering, a recompense from inadvertent transgression offering, then in that case, the Kohen who actually performs the offering, who actually does the offering, meaning cuts up the animal, throws the fat on the fire, rubs the blood on the horns of the altar of sacrifice, and then pours the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. That Kohen who's performing it, he can eat it within the confines of the tent of meeting, within the confines of the courtyard of the tent of meeting. Okay, but for the more serious types, no Kohen can eat it. Nobody can eat it. The rest gets taken out of the camp and burnt on the ash heap. Okay, so that gives us more laws. That clarifies or gives us more information about the sin offering, which we learned in Leviticus 4. Again, 4 scenarios for the sin offering. Again, we're not calling it a sin offering. We're calling it a recompense from inadvertent offense offering. So there are 4 scenarios that we learned about in Leviticus 4. The Kohen Gadol, the entire Israelite community. Those first 2 scenarios are the most serious. Kohen takes some of the blood, sprinkles it on the curtain inside the tent of meeting, and then the rest is taken out of the camp, or the rest aside from the forbidden fats and the discarded pieces are taken out of the camp and burnt on the ash heap outside of the camp. So that's scenarios 1 and 2. Scenarios 3 and 4, the less serious scenarios, that's a leader or any member of the community, then the blood is not dashed against the curtain inside the tent of meeting. It's rubbed on the horns of the altar of sacrifice outside of the tent of meeting in the courtyard. The rest of the blood is spilled at the base of the altar, and then the Kohen can eat, aside from the forbidden fats, which are always, as we said, given to Yahweh, always given to God and thrown on the altar. The Kohen can eat. The Kohen who actually did perform this sacrifice, he can eat the rest of that animal, and that's the same with scenario number 4, which is a lay Israelite. Okay, so leader, lay Israelite, Kohen can eat. The Kohen who did the sacrifice can eat it. And in the more serious scenarios, because it's such a serious sin, it affects the entire community, then portion of the blood is sprinkled against the curtain, and then the entire rest of the animal is brought outside of the camp and burnt in the ash heap outside of the camp. Okay, so that sums up this end of Leviticus 6, speaking about the sin offering. Let's just peek ahead to Leviticus 7. I'm going to end here. Okay, and we're going to get more laws for the guilt offering, and then the peace offering, and then we're going to talk about more aspects of the sacrifices in general. Okay, the forbidden fats and the blood are forbidden, the priest portion, and then finally in Leviticus 8 we get back to some narrative. Okay, and then actually a little bit more. Okay, and then in Leviticus 9 we get to, actually it's Leviticus 10, then we get back to the story of Nadav and Avihu. Okay, but I don't know when we're going to get to that. I think what I'm going to do next week is just continue where we left off. So we finished now Leviticus chapter 6. And I think what we're going to do is continue in Leviticus chapter 7 next week. So we can go through the entire section regarding the offerings, regarding the sacrifices, and try to get a whole picture. And if you missed previous weeks, I always point out you can listen to the videos on YouTube. These videos are all recorded and they stay permanently on YouTube. You can just follow the YouTube link, and you can see the previous week's videos, or you can always just go to the Karaite Insights YouTube channel and you can find them there. Okay, they're under the live section since these are recorded live. Okay, let's kind of wrap it up here. Any questions, any comments? Before we kind of wrap it up? I know it's technical. I hope it wasn't so technical that it turns you off. Again, the idea is to really study like an entire unit of study and see how all the pieces of the puzzle fit together, how the whole picture fits together. And that's really my goal. Again, rather than just rushing through the book of Leviticus, nobody gets anything out of it. People fall asleep, rabbis fall asleep during the Torah reading, and then it's just like, there's no point to it. I'd rather go slow and see the pictures of the puzzle, how they all fit together, rather than just rush through the book of Leviticus and stick necessarily to the schedule, which is the rabbinical schedule, by the way, of the Torah portion of the week. Okay. So, any questions, any comments before we end? Anybody? No. If not, then what if the whole healing oil thing was made up so they could sell olive oil that was not good enough to eat? Oh, that's not directed towards me. All right, then. So what I'm going to do is I'll put on another couple songs so you guys can just chat, since I see we're having a pretty active chat here. So I'll let you guys just chat among yourselves. And I'm going to pretty much end it here. It was a little bit of a shorter study than usual, but that's because we started late due to something I had to take care of here. But I, once again, thank you for joining us. Spread the word about the study. They say if you subscribe and share and like all this stuff, it gets the word out. It like the YouTube algorithm picks it up and lets other people know about it. But so please get the word out. I see the numbers are gradually going up, and I would just love them to continue going up. I think it's really important for the nation of Israel and for all of us to get the Karaite point of view. Needless to say. Not only do I think it's important, I think it's absolutely essential because I think it's the only future of the nation of Israel for us to return, to reject our two foreign gods. The two foreign gods of Israel, as I always like to say, the foreign god of Tel Aviv is the United States of America / the West, and the foreign god of Jerusalem, the current god of Jerusalem, is the false god of the Talmud / rabbis. Okay? So with that being said, let's end on a happy note and say that I thank you all for joining me here. And I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. We'll go out with some music, and Be'ezarat Yahweh, we will see you again next week. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov. Let's get some music going.
Ayoni unifzele lekashem Ramayam Avayai I know all eyes Yemechaucham Yakadorim Yedavanenu Lifnei Hashem Kivolish B'Torah No Yishba'et Tevel V'Tzevedek Yavavavavamim V'Bemei Shorim The song is dedicated to my second daughter, Mahada, my pride, Nadara. Da-dee-da-da, 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 da-dee-da. Da-dee-dee-da, da-dee-da-da, da-dee-da-da, da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-dee-da-da-da-da. Da-dee-da-da, da-dee-da-da, da-da-dee-da-da-da-da. B'Shem Hashem Elokei Yisroel Hamimini Michoel U'mismoili Gavriel U'milfonai Uriel Me'achoirai Refuel Avial Roshi, Avial Roshi, Hashechin Askel. B'Shem Hashem Melekei Yisroel Mimini Michoel U'mismoili Gavriel U'milfonai
Okay, friends, this is brothers and sisters. This is a song. Actually, this is actually the Jewish answer to the world. The first thing we say, "O Davinu Chai," God is living, God is living, God is living. And then we tell the world, as long as God is living, as long as God is living, Am Yisrael Chai, Israel is living. Because you and I know the truth, as long as there's one God in the world. Israel is eternal, there'll always be Jews in the world because God has chosen us to carry his torch, his light to the world. O Davinu Chai, O Davinu